Welcome back. This is Breezing Through, and I'm Emily. So today we're going to talk about the next part of working in my son's room. I'm very excited to show you what I've been doing. I am still wearing the gloves. My son is very heavy, for one, but two, I had to add an extra post for this part of the build, and I didn't allocate for it originally. Otherwise, I would have done it when I was doing the rest of the railing, but I needed to put in another railing post for support. And one of the things that really hurts my wrists is twisting those support posts in, especially the big ones. And this was a big one. So I really needed to keep these on, and I need to just continue wearing them for a while. But I'm so excited to show you what I've been doing. So when I did his room and I planned this out, I really could have just done his bed, the reading nook underneath, and then the second story. But this room is super tall. And so I wanted to add an additional space, so one more platform, but it wasn't going to go all the way around because the ceiling is vaulted and it's different heights. And I have a lot of things I want to talk to the builder about that I'm not happy with, including the ceiling in that room. Anyway, so I'm going to show you how I build a third story platform. So fun. I'm adding a ladder because you need to get up there. And it took me a long time to figure out what I was going to do for how the kids were going to access that area. And I landed on building my own ladder. That got a little complicated for some reason. I don't know what the deal with that was, but I figured it out. Anyway, let's get started. I'm going to show you what I'm doing. So excited. Can't wait for you to see it. So first thing was cutting all of the wood. I like to do this and get everything cut at once instead of cutting things as I need it, just because it makes it easier for me. And working with a toddler, I can do this all at once while he's napping and then get stuff done later while he's awake because he's willing to let me paint and build stuff while he's awake. You may notice that I'm cutting an additional 4x4 post, and that is because I ended up needing to add a whole other railing post for this loft that I did not initially account for. And because I was going to be putting plywood up to enclose this space, I wanted to continue the same details that I had on my son's bed up on this plywood as well. So once I had that cut down, I used some bowls that we have and I made circles and traced them on to the plywood. I made these much smaller than the ones that I put on his bed so that it was not at all possible for him to use these to climb out. And then I cut them out with my jigsaw. If you saw the video I did when I made my son's bed, I did have a hard time with the jigsaw getting the circles the size and shape that I wanted. I feel like this time it was a lot easier. My jigsaw is probably one of my least used tools, and so I'm still getting comfortable with it, but I'm getting there. Then I sanded everything down to make sure it was ready for paint, and then it was time to paint. I primed everything and then started going in with color. For the 4x4 post, I needed it to be two different colors, so I started off with yellow on one end, and then I started on the steps for the ladder. I decided after a lot of considering that it'd be fun to use almost all of the colors from this project instead of just one. So I went in with 2 coats of paint on each side of these 2x4 pieces. This is all Benjamin Moore paint, and in order from closest to the screen to furthest away, the colors I'm using are Limon, Honeybell, Coastal Paradise, Sea to Shining Sea, and 2 new colors, Mighty Aphrodite and Willow Springs Green. And the Willow Springs Green I then went and used on the other end of the 4x4 post and to paint the plywood that's going to go on this section of the bed. And if you've never watched any of my videos before, the best way to get the best finish is to do 2 coats of primer, sanding in between each coat, and 2 coats of paint. Once all the paint was dry, it was time to start installing everything. So like I said before, I needed to add an additional railing post for support for this loft space that I'm adding to this structure. So I had to take the railing out of the section right here and then add the hanger bolt and screw that into the frame below. And then I marked where the hanger bolt was going to end up on the bottom of the post, drilled out the hole using a smaller drill bit, and then screwed the post in. These posts are a major reason why I've had to continue to wear these gloves and wrist supports, because these are really hard to do. And I already have an injury to both wrists from carrying around my giant toddler, and these posts don't make it any easier. So once I had the post in, I'd already cut the railing that needed to go back in here to the correct sizes. So I reinstalled that. You can hardly tell that this was added as an afterthought later because I completely forgot to consider it when I was designing everything. You may have noticed that 2 of the posts on the top still need to be painted that green. That's because when I originally put those up, I didn't have the green paint yet. And so I was waiting, and I will do that eventually. I then started installing the frame for the platform. I used the 4x4 posts as anchors along with the studs in the wall. The only piece that is not anchored is the piece that goes along the front, but it is still anchored to a 4x4 and the other 2x4 that's attached to the wall. I did want to have a piece of plywood on the underneath part of this to kind of create a ceiling in the little fort area that's being created underneath this loft. And so when I was installing that, I realized that I needed to remove 3 of the 4 frame pieces in order to get that on there. So I had to take those off, then put the ceiling piece in, then reattach the frame, and then attach the ceiling plywood piece to the frame. And I just used pocket holes to secure the support pieces to the frame so that there are support pieces on the inside, making it stable and something we can stand on. And then I added some plywood pieces to the top, which is where I'm going to be adding flooring in the next step, I believe. We'll see if that's the next step or not, but there's something that's going on here. After the frame was all ready, it was time to install the outside plywood pieces that enclose this area to make it safe. I did add additional 2x4s to the frame for where the plywood's going so that the plywood had additional places to secure to, and then it was not just like flapping around at the top. I just wanted it to be really secure. I used my extendable ladder to get up here, which if you know me in person at all, you know that I absolutely loathe heights. And so while this isn't really that high up, being on a ladder like this is terrifying to me. Do not love that at all. The things we do for our kids. I used a clamp to hold the plywood piece in place while I then secured it to the frame. You may see at the top that some of the 4x4 posts are visible. Didn't exactly account for that originally, but I'm going to add caps to the tops of them like I did on the railing just to kind of bring everything together. In order to do the second piece of plywood, I had to bring it through the top so that I wouldn't fall off the ladder, because that is one of my biggest fears, and secure it with the clamp. Once it was up there, I then just used screws to secure the plywood to the frame. Right now in this moment, I'm not filling the screw holes and painting over them because I'm going to have to do that for the entire space. And so I'm just going to do that all at once. Next up, it was time to make the ladder that was going to help the kids get from the second platform to the third platform. I'll make a separate video that's way more in detail on how I did this, but I'm using 2x4s that I cut at a 20-degree angle at the bottom so that it was an angled ladder. And then I have these 2x4 pieces for the steps that I secured to the longer 2x4s that are the sides. And I secured those at a 20-degree angle. And because of the 20-degree angle on the bottom of the 2x4 sides and then the 20-degree angle on the steps are level and parallel to the floor. Now, I wanted to make sure that this ladder was secure to the rest of the structure. So I took out the plywood topper that I'd put on the frame, and then I added a trim piece on the outside so that it all looked cohesive, because I don't want just raw 2x4 to be showing. And then I attached the ladder to the frame from the inside on one side and on the outside of the other side, because there were 2x4s in the way. Once that was all secure, I also secured it to the bottom of the frame, so the bed frame, and then I put the underlayment back on. And here's the result. Here is this loft space with a kind of little fort underneath it. The kids are absolutely loving it. So what do you think? I love it. I think it's awesome. The kids love it. It just adds a little bit of extra to the space. So structurally, the room is done. I'm not adding any more structures. I will be adding more details. So I still need to do all the trim. I need to install flooring. I need to do all the finish work, lots of nail holes and screw holes to fill in and paint over, just do paint touch-ups. So there's a lot still going on. And then on the other side of the room, I have to build a Murphy bed. So this project's going to go into 2026. So if you've been invested in this, don't worry, it's still going. Got a lot to do. But I'm very excited with how structurally it is now. So if you like this video and you want to see the rest of the project, make sure you like and subscribe so it goes to your feed. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.